I have to tell you, I just watched President Trump's news conference. Listen, it's one thing for internet pundits to spew off conspiracy theories. It's another for the President of the United States to throw out idle speculation as bodies are still being recovered and families still being notified. It just turns your stomach.
That was Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer yesterday, not mincing words in his reaction to President Trump's comments, suggesting diversity programs somehow caused Wednesday night's deadly collision involving a passenger jet and military helicopter. Joining us now, Washington correspondent for Spectrum News, Kevin Frey. Kevin, talk about how Democrats, we heard Schumer there, but are talking about Trump's recent comments and the way that he's really stepping out of line with procedurally the way that these kinds of investigations are done. Typically, all these updates come from the NTSB, obviously not.
Well, and not even that. I mean, when you think of these tragedies, there's typically a very clear-cut way that things proceed. The president usually comes out and provides a unifying message. Think of Ronald Reagan after the Challenger explosion, Bill Clinton after Oklahoma City, the list goes on, trying to pump the brakes on any speculation and then allowing things to play out while at the same time trying to unify the country, essentially playing the role of consoler-in-chief. That did not really happen beyond the first maybe 3 minutes of yesterday's press conference before we devolved over into conspiracies and conjecture about what may or may not have happened without any evidence to back it up. So you've seen Democrats really latch on to this. They have, you know this certainly well, have faced some scrutiny from even within their ranks over the past week or so, that they're floundering and there's a deluge of news and there's so much happening and what are we doing? This is one area where they clearly very easily were able to fall in line. And you saw Senator Schumer there, you saw Congressman Hakeem Jeffries and rank and file below them going on the attack, basically saying, how dare you try to make this about race, about women, about equity? This is a tragedy of colossal scale.
So as Democrats are trying to figure out the way that they respond, one of the ways that we've reported on, and I know you're covering this as well, is that Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, who also happen to be New Yorkers and thusly very in your wheelhouse, are talking about not swinging at every ball, basically, but when the ball is what we saw yesterday from the White House press briefing room, you absolutely have to swing at that.
Oh, I mean, it was like right over home plate, and I shouldn't be devolving into sports metaphors because
it's everything from the OMB memo to asking federal workers to take buyouts to then, of course, the president himself coming in the briefing room.
So what I thought was the most illustrative thing that Jeffries has said over the last 3 months or so was in the weeks right after the election, he said to our colleague Paul Kane with the Washington Post, essentially, I'm not going to spend the next 4 years responding to every thing that this president does. I'm not going to be reacting to every tweet and Truth Social post. And part of that is the Democrats have decided, at least this go around, we're focusing on a message. What does the president do as opposed to what does the president say? Now, you have to respond when the president says things like yesterday, but they've really honed in on this economic message, believing that's the major takeaway from the 2024 election, that they're here to support working families and so forth. And so when it comes to the funding freeze from earlier this week, that plays right into that message, that they can say that this president is more concerned about freezing up funds so he can give, as Schumer described it the other day, rob Peter to pay the billionaires. And he's not concerned about you in the middle class. So this is an area where they have now been able to really hone in on that message and not to say take the bait, but essentially take the bait when Trump has thrown it up into the air.
Yeah, and I will say I was even sent an ad this morning from one of the main House super PACs that's going to be going up on the air with an economic-related message. A lot of focus on things like price of eggs, cost of milk. Those were central to the 2024 election. I was wondering as I watched the press conference yesterday from the White House if Republicans would, even privately, because we know that privately they sound differently than they do publicly, but if they were unnerved by what we saw at the podium yesterday.
Well, we certainly really haven't seen much of it. Notably, I think maybe silence is the thing that speaks more so than otherwise. You saw, I think, some of the typical Republicans you might expect, like Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski coming out and kind of expressing some what exactly was he doing, discomfort's going on. But we've not seen a lot of animated pushback, and some of that is just illustrative of the fact that the Hill has transformed in the past 8 years into much more of a party that's more or less willing to go along with this. And also on top of that, DEI was part of the conversation for a vast majority of the Republican Party during the 2024 cycle.
Yeah, it was a key point, actually. And I think what we're seeing so early on in this administration is almost as if the 4 years in between the two Trump terms didn't happen, because the private conversations that I've had with Republican lawmakers are exactly what they were: the anxiety, the consternation.
And we picked up right where we left off with I didn't see that tweet. I don't know what you're talking about when you asked him about it.
Exactly. Hill reporters coming ready with the receipts. Once again, Kevin Frey, bringing the receipts to us. Thank you.
No problem.